Good morning, everyone, and happy Sunday to you. Thank you for tuning in for another episode of North Alabama Law Review, presented by Johnston and Weston. I'm your host, Shauna Hill. Today we have joining us again Mr. Bennett Driggers and Mr. Christopher Weston. Good morning, guys.
Good morning.
Good morning again. I'm sitting over on this side again. You know, now I can kind of look down the aisle here. Yeah.
We got to make sure we get our good angles. Well, today's legal topic is going to be about adoption and a new state law to pass. So this one is Senate Bill number 94. This one makes it that, well, I guess, Bennett, you would be a little bit better person to explain what exactly the bill is better than I could. So I'm going to let you jump into that.
So the bill's fairly new, but some of the things it covers is when you give consent to relinquish your parental rights, you do have the right to withdraw that consent within a certain amount of time. It has to be a document that is prepared in a certain way. So, you know, if you're in this situation, again, we're not promoting our business, but see an attorney and make sure that document is done properly. There are certain requirements that have to be in that document to withdraw your consent for terminating your parental rights. And I think you need to speak with an attorney anyways, because there are a lot of ramifications to terminating your parental rights. This is a permanent thing once that time frame's passed for withdrawing your consent. So know your rights, know what you're giving up, and know the way it's going to affect you going forward before you decide to give consent to terminate your parental rights. But there again, if you do and you're still within that time frame, you can withdraw that, but it has to be done a certain way to be legal. So see an attorney for that. And then it establishes some other things. There are certain things that the Department of Human Resources has to do within an adoption process. Even if it's a private adoption, you have to have a home study. There's agencies that do that aren't the Department of Human Resources, but know that there's certain things, investigation has to be done. The courts obviously aren't going to just not check somebody out that's wanting to adopt a child. They're going to do their research. They're going to check your criminal background and other things to make sure that you're legitimate, number one, number two, and that they're not placing this child in danger through this adoption. So keep that in mind. That's one of the things they're updating, is more ways to structure how that's done through DHR, and more requirements on them when an adoption occurs. So the other part of this is these provisions are there to protect the parental rights, so that a parent whose rights are going to be terminated, is required certain notices under the law, and the right to be personally served when their rights are going to be terminated, and the right to defend that. So if you get in this situation, if you haven't consented to an adoption, you get notice that a step parent or somebody's trying to adopt your child, you need to seek legal counsel immediately. Sometimes that happens through a termination of parental rights through a DHR action. Sometimes it can be private. So seek help. This legislation is here to make sure that guidelines are followed and that everyone's rights are protected and the best interests of the child are met. There's a lot of things that can happen in these cases. If they do go forward and you've answered and you don't want your rights terminated, then there's hearings that have to be held. They're going to have to prove that you're an unfit parent, that you're a danger to the child in some way, that you can't care for this child. There's just a lot of things. They're going to have to prove possibly abandonment. So there's a lot of things that go on here. And those are put in place to protect both the child and the parents. So talk to an attorney. These changes are minute in some ways, but very important to protect your rights as a parent. So keep that in mind. Chris, you have anything to add?
Yeah, you know, as you're going through that and we're talking about this law, and in the last episode we spoke about, you know, felons losing their right to own firearms, and it's just kind of triggered this thought here. about constitutional rights and having them taken away versus voluntarily giving them away. And this is something a lot of people really just do not understand because it is very complex. It is just a huge area of litigation because it involves so many different things. So understand that, voluntarily giving away your constitutional rights, whether it is a termination of parental rights, giving away custody, again, not owning a firearm. Again, if you choose to voluntarily not own a firearm, you can do so very easily. You just don't go get one. You're not required to. When it comes to dealing with children and the constitutional right of being able to be a parent and raise your children as you see fit, if you decide to voluntarily do it, and people do, I mean, this is not, a termination of parental rights or a change in custody does not always have the stigma on it that most people think. Everyone thinks, oh, well, custody's been changed or parental rights have been terminated. There are a lot of very valid, very good reasons to do those things that have no negative reflection on the person giving up or losing those rights. It does happen. Sometimes it can be a catastrophic accident and they are literally, unfortunately, in a vegetative state in a hospital and there's nothing else that they could do. They can't sign their names. They don't understand. They don't understand what's going on and it's heartbreaking. But understand that, when you're dealing with the constitutional right, giving one up voluntarily usually involves the court system through documents, through testimony, just making sure you really know what you're doing, okay? Really making certain that you understand I am fully giving these things up because like you were mentioning, there's a lot of things that can happen in a termination or a TPR action. One of those things is just a change in custody instead of a termination of parental rights. A termination of parental rights is where your rights are completely terminated as a parent. You don't owe anything, but you have no rights to that child, a say over that child, visitation with that child. There are a lot of things that can be done leading up to that. Also, DHR has an obligation if you are if it's involuntary and you're going to involuntarily lose your rights as a parent, DHR has a requirement to try to help you get over whatever is happening that is making you an unfit parent. Unless, of course, certain things like sexual abuse, unfortunately, which can happen, significant violence against a child or children. And so that kind of leads me into the next portion of this is the side of it where, it's an involuntary loss of constitutional rights. I touched on last time when you show a willingness and have been convicted of willfully, abusing your rights as a citizen. In this instance, abusing your rights of being a parent at the expense of another. And so, those have heightened burdens. And so, again, just when people are thinking of constitutional rights, I am not the expert in adoption. You are, again, I see it around the office, obviously. But when it comes to constitutional rights in general, understand the difference between a voluntary relinquishment and a forceful taking by the state. These are two very different things. And one usually just requires that notice be given to the person giving up those rights so that it's very clear that someone understood what they were doing. The other one has heightened procedures every time. And that's what I want to get to is that if you are in something dealing with the termination of parental rights, if you are dealing with, a loss of a firearm right or a loss of transportation, etc., any of your constitutional rights, then you're dealing with a heightened procedure. You're dealing with a heightened burden. And that is something, like Bennett said, come and see an attorney. And the reason we're saying that, we're recommending that, is not really advertisement. It's that those process and procedures are much higher. They are much more nuanced. They are more complex. They are more stringent. And they are so because you're dealing with constitutional rights. And so whenever you're dealing with a constitutional right and you're dealing with one where you're about to lose it, getting a lawyer is the smartest move that you can make because of that heightened procedure and that heightened burden. If I don't actually choke on that biscuit from this morning. Need a little water.
Yeah, the courts always look at what's in the best interest of the child in these circumstances. And, sometimes the best interest of the child, unfortunately, is adoption. Now, if you're going through an agency, adoption agency or something like that, they're going to advise you, they're going to guide you. That's the reason you go to the agency as somebody who's adopting a child. And there's a very strong need in our community for foster parenting and adoptions. There's a lot of kids who don't have a family that are able or willing to take care of them, and they're sad situations. So keep that in mind if you have the ability and the desire. Reach out to DHR, an adoption agency, or someone, and become a foster parent. Or like I said, there's a great need for foster parents all over the state. You see it advertised all the time. So become a foster parent, and then sometimes eventually those lead to adoptions through the department, things like that. Nobody's trying to take a parent's rights away, but if a parent is unwilling and unable, or sometimes just totally unable due to circumstances, those kids need a permanent home. So keep that in mind. That's something that nobody wants to see, but unfortunately it's one of those things that we have to deal with, and it benefits the children, and that's the whole purpose, is to make sure they have a stable home, a loving environment to live in. So as we go about the negative side of this, got to think of the positive too. There's those kids out there that are really in need of family that's going to love them and raise them properly and be a permanent fixture in their life.
And then I guess to give people a little bit behind the scenes, you'll see me joke about, not always being a probate lawyer. Bennett has the patience and the compassion. I only have the compassion for the children in that area of law. So Bennett is, very good at coming in and being patient with everyone, and obviously having the compassion and the knowledge to handle all of those situations. I have the compassion, but sometimes when I hear what you're dealing with in that area of law, wow, I don't always have the patience with that.
But
so
it's for the
commendable.
children, it's for the babies.
Well,
it's for
that's
you.
what I'm saying, that when I hear someone has done something wrong to a child, a whole different side comes out of me.
Yeah.
Right.
And it is very difficult. And so, just a little bit behind the scenes. That's why sometimes lawyers will do one area and not another quite as much, even if they have some of the knowledge for it. So, I don't know, just a little bit of something extra this morning.
Well, like Bennett said, if you want information or have any questions when it comes to adoption, definitely contact our office. We'll be happy to speak with you. And tune into our show next week, because we are going to touch base a little bit more when it comes to youth such as JU cases. So definitely tune in next week to learn a little bit more on that side of the law. Well, thank you guys. That was great information that you put out. I do want to go ahead and jump into some trending topics. So thank you guys for submitting the questions. Let's go ahead and get into our first one. So the first one is going to pertain to family law. Bennett, of course, your area. This person wrote in and said that them and their ex have been separated but not divorced for many years. They are now recently engaged to a new fiance and would like to go ahead and complete their divorce process from their ex. However, they can now not locate them. So Bennett, how would we handle that kind of situation?
Wait, before Bennett answers this question, I've got to tell everyone at home, this happens a lot more than you would think. Like, this is something we see a lot. Like, it is actually shocking how people lose their spouse for the better part of a decade. I have heard so many of these around the office. So, Betty, you got to answer that question. But I just had to bring in, it was shocking to me how often this occurs.
Some of us can't get away from our exes. Some of us can't find them.
Yeah, there you go. That's how it works, man.
Well, there's ways. You're going to have to file. Unfortunately, this is not what we call an uncontested matter. Just because you can't get the other side to agree or sign anything, because totally they're hiding from you. I'm sorry.
Yeah, fair enough. Fair enough.
But there are ways you would get with your attorney and you file an adoption. I'm sorry, I'm still on the kids.
Adopt a new spouse.
Yeah, adopt a new spouse. No, you.
That's called marriage.
Yeah. For women that's true. They're adopting a child when they marry a man. But anyways, you would, in all seriousness, you would have to file a divorce action. And with that, you would try to get a process server to find them. But if you cannot find them, then after efforts are made, you can show to the court that efforts have been made. You can show abandonment of the marriage because, well, 10 years or so, whatever they said, awfully long time. But and then, you know, you can have that action go through once you file. They don't answer. You show the court the efforts that were made to serve them and find them. You may be required to do a publication. There's certain things you might be required to do, but the bottom line is you're not stuck. And don't, by all means, don't just go get married again. No, then you're breaking the law. So
Yeah, don't do that.
yeah, don't do that.
I've seen that a few times too.
So go through the proper channels, give an attorney. We can advise you on those things, make sure that it's done properly so you don't find out 2-3 years later, hey, I'm still married to the other guy too, or the other woman too. So be careful with this, but there are ways. You're not stuck.
Yeah, and you know, is this part of the procedure actually tracks both in general civil law, including business law, as well as marriage? Because again, I tell people all the time, if you're thinking about going into a partnership with somebody in business, it's like you're marrying them. That's how that functions. So just tie in for the long haul. And people will lose their business partner sometimes too, which I don't know how that happens, but it most certainly does. And so basically what you're gonna have to do is what's known as a service by publication, like Bennett was saying, is that, you know, the only thing I really have to add to it is the fact that you have to show the court steps, and that catches a lot of people off guard because they're like, well, I've just told everybody I haven't seen him in 7 years. How am I supposed to find him? It's like, but because again, it is a right either in a marriage or a business. Those are certain rights that you have in those institutions. And so you have to show steps. Even if you know you are spinning wheels, you have to show legitimate good faith attempts before you can just service by publication and then get a default. We did have one that one time though that we did service by publication and they actually showed up. That was an interesting moment because it's like, so you ignored everything else until it was in the newspaper. Like I don't know how that functions, but that did occur.
I think the general public, they tend to think, 6 months in the newspaper or giving notice, and if it doesn't work, then you did your due diligence. What other recommendations of trying to make contact with your ex besides hiring a PI would you kind of recommend?
Put a bell on them. No.
You can find them to do that.
Just put a bell on it, man. There's lots of tracking devices nowadays. Don't actually do that.
It's just, I don't think that's the necessary steps. I mean, you hire a process server to try and serve them, trying to find them. I can't talk this Sunday morning, sorry. But trying to find them sometimes is a futile effort. You're not going to be able, if they don't want to be found, they're not going to be found. Actually, though, there are some process servers out there that are pretty good at locating people fairly quickly. But
or an angry woman, just find an angry woman.
Yeah, the point is you don't have to go in overkill mode and hire a PI or anything. You could, but again, there are other ways to do it through a process server. So keep that in mind. Just before you spend a lot of money on a private investigator, let's try some of the more inexpensive ways first. But
look, I got to throw out my personal favorite one of those. They were tracking somebody down. I was in New York. This wasn't my case. I was literally, I think I had just graduated or something like that. This lady went on a date with a guy to process serve him. That 100% occurred. Like literally went on a date with him and halfway through dinner.
She got creative with that one.
Got him.
That's finding the right process.
That's exactly
That's
right.
dedication.
Literally worth her weight in gold. It's like, wow.
All right,
sorry,
guys.
probably next question time. It is early. I've had a lot of coffee.
Well, the next one is going to be is right up your alley, Chris. It's a civil question.
Oh, here we go.
So this one states that if my car gets towed and there is damage done to my vehicle during the tow, can I get reimbursed for any tow damages?
Well, first, park somewhere else. No, I'm kidding. Couldn't help myself. So yes, so understand there is, an implied warranty of workmanship. There's also which can and cannot apply in that scenario. It really depends on that, but that's still negligence. That just because your car is getting towed because you're somewhere you shouldn't be, or maybe they made a mistake and you're getting towed, or maybe, again, we've seen it where someone gets injured, their car is sitting at the side of the road and then someone has to come and tow it. You can't be negligent as a tow truck driver or a towing company when you're moving somebody's car, right? So like if there is something out there where like it's some type of damage that had nothing to do with what the tow truck driver was doing, but something like pre-existing, like a bad axle, and then they did everything right and the axle falls off because, you had bad whatever's back there in the axle that holds it together. I don't remember. Then that's not going to be on the tow truck driver. So just any damage is not the tow truck driver's fault. Just because they didn't know your car, and we've seen that sometimes, right? But if you have done something as a tow truck driver, or you've had that done to you, where somebody has come in and inappropriately towed a vehicle because they either didn't understand that make and model, they, were being lazy, they were in a rush, whatever it was, that's still negligence. You're not allowed, even if it's an involuntary tow, you are not allowed to negligently do your job. Okay, you cannot. So yeah, you absolutely, in that situation, the tow truck driver or tow truck company, tongue twisters on this Sunday morning, absolutely would be liable. Okay, and that's just the way that functions. And
Gotcha.
Now, those of you at home, be careful on this though, is that this is one of those times where I always tell people, consult an attorney, even if it's small claims damage, because they will call you. A lot of times we've seen this and try to loop you into taking some kind of fault because, again, we've gone over on another show. Contributory negligence can waive your full right to recovery in Alabama. And so they may get you to try to admit to just doing something a little wrong, just a little bit your fault to try to get around that. So realistically, if you really think someone else has done wrong and they're not engaging with you, they're expecting you to call them, or they're calling you up and questioning you, like what you did, how you did it, instead of just, hey, what's the damage? Be on your guard, okay? Because, and this is something, and for some reason, it's not even all that much in like larger litigation. It's little stuff that people will try to get real sneaky. And it's like, guys, you're just walking yourself into more liability, like cut it loose. Like this is not the thing to do this on. And again, sometimes you do see it in larger litigation, but most of the time it's in this little stuff. And so if they're not engaging with you in good faith, even if they're being quote unquote cordial or nice, do not engage with them because you're likely dealing with them trying to avoid accountability. And you do not want to walk into a perfect case, get to court, they hit a record button in Alabama because it's a one-party consent state as far as recording goes, and then you said, well, I did kind of park a little bit over the line where you would have had to get around that pole. I see what you're talking about. And now they have a defense when they ripped out half the bottom of your car. So just be aware.
Thank you. Ben, you want to add anything?
No, I think that about covers it. That's a pretty simple question there.
Yeah, no, that was a straightforward one.
Yeah.
Yes, you can sue, and bluntly put, you probably should. That's where I'm at.
Gotcha. Thank you so much. From what I hear, on, just hearing about these type of cases in general, is that you can be made whole again. Is that kind of the same situation? Is whatever damages they do that pertain to the tow, they're obligated to make right and make you whole again?
Oh yeah, in most cases.
In most cases.
Yeah. So, but it's not just, and this is when people calculate damage. And I'm sorry, Ben, if you jump in after this one, but I'm hot under the collar about this kind of damage stuff because this is something I deal with all the time, every single day. Is that they're not just responsible for the damage to your car, the time or any loss of income or anything else from not having the car, from you having to take time off work, if you had to take PTO, any other hardships that you can quantify in some way, they're also going to be liable for in most instances, okay? And then if they get fraudulent with it, which we'll see sometimes they'll send out some mechanic as the basis to do the repairs, They get under there and they do the worst job and just try to put a Band-Aid on a bullet hole. And realistically, that is all kinds of other intentional torts. So you can multiply the litigation and the value the more dishonest you want to be. And that's why I bring this up, is because a lot of times with clients, they'll come to me and they'll just be so upset and so angry. And they're like, this person's lying. This person's breaching our agreement. This person is, being fraudulent. And I'll be like, take a breath. They just multiplied your claim. So it's okay. Take a moment, okay? And, likewise though, when you come into settlements and you come into dealing with, resolving litigations, is that there's a time value to money. So, there's always a balance. Guys, it's the scales of justice, right? There's always a balance. But it's the time value of money. It's the hassle of going through. It's, legal claims against it, or mitigating circumstances, or aggravating circumstances. It's there's always a cost to a fight. And this is the kind of way I tend to put it to clients, is that in any kind of a fight, there's a cost, okay? And so just like if you were on the street or in the boxing ring, or if it was a physical fight or a legal fight or whatever it is, you should always weigh the cost of the fight. Now, some people will get away with that, a lot of things, because most people will go, oh, it's not worth the fight. And you have to decide, are you going to be the one person who decides to take it into their jaw, or are you not? Mm-hmm. And sometimes it's absolutely worth it. I mean, I wouldn't have a job if it wasn't. And I like doing it. But realistically speaking, understand that any fight has a cost, and weigh that out. And again, think about that before a marriage to a spouse you may not know where they are for a decade, or deciding to go ahead and shoot randomly in this direction, or enter into a business partnership with a guy you've known for 6 months. Probably not a good idea if you end up getting into a fight, right? So again, a little bit of foreknowledge.
Thank you. That's a lot of information. I'm sure a lot of valuable information that people in the area can relate to as well.
I hope so, because I talk too much.
Well, if you want to hear us and Christopher talk more, be sure to listen in next Sunday at 6 a.m. for our law show. And please, guys, submit your questions to us. We would love to answer them on air. Any topic. We cover most areas of law at our law firm, so don't be afraid to ask it. And if we can't answer it, we know who to talk to be able to answer your question. So again, that email is legalhelp@jmmtlawfirm.com. Please, guys, go ahead and send them over. But we do appreciate you tuning in to us. Again, we're going to cover some juvenile topics next week, so be sure to tune in next Sunday at 6 a.m. All right, thank you, and have a great
day,
week,
guys.
everybody.
Appreciate you.
Yeah, have a good Sunday.
Thank you.